I've finally have managed to figure out the definition of incest versus the strong feelings among certain countries of the planet who are against it. It parallels, very interestingly enough, the ideology of possession. And what I'm doing is I'm comparing Russia to the United States. Russia's very short of money. They're not rich. They've been poor for ages. They're struggling. They're not making a whole lot of progress by comparison to China or Japan. But, and here's the interesting part, they were communists, right? And they didn't necessarily call themselves that. They called themselves the United Socialist Soviet Republic, like before the Berlin Wall came down and whatnot. Or no, afterwards when Russia, disassociated all of its satellite countries under its communist umbrella. Well, when you view possessions, however you view possessions is how you view sex. So if you view possessions in a communal fashion, which everybody holds the limited amount of possessions that the family possesses in common, share alike, then the boundaries, the rigor of having boundaries evaporates. And that translates or bleeds over into also the sense of boundaries regarding possessions. Like in Russia, they'll have 8 people sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment, family, extended family. And so you can imagine that the sense of privacy that we pride ourselves in the West, it ain't there. And so sexuality, the privacy regarding sexuality is not there. And so this is why I'm saying a lot of these pictures from Russia that have to do with Russian nudists, their view of the nudism lifestyle is quite different than here in the United States, because they don't have the boundaries we have, because they don't have the boundaries of possession, and because they have to share their possessions in common to make full use of limited resources, and sex goes the same route. So it isn't poverty necessarily that defines incest. It's simply communalism, the cooperative possession of, our patent laws, have every sense of, or our copyright laws has every sense of this non-communalism about them. And so this is why I can see why it's indicative of an entire culture to support incest. Not make a big deal about it, not talk about it and advertise it to the rest of the world just so they can be persecuted for that. But it's there, and there's a reason for it, because it doesn't merely parallel their economic standing. It's one of the side effects of their economic ideology, and I don't mean commerce, I mean the family. The economics of the family unit, not the economics of a business. But our family, or let me put it the other way, our commercial ideology has bled into the family. And that means that public policy has also bled into so-called community values, so that community values are dictated by public policy. Now it's true, we get the government we deserve, and consciousness, the collective consciousness of a nation, dictates how a country operates. But that also is indicative of the sexual repression that Wilhelm Reich talked about, and how he was hated in the West. He was hated in Europe, he was hated in the States. He's hated because in Western political theology, boundaries are very important. That's why, 100 Years' War in Europe, tiny little countries in Europe, so many of them, yet they have a very strong sense of national boundaries, or else they wouldn't have been making war so much with each other in prior centuries. And the Indian nations, the same thing, So we can regale, oh, the Indian nation never integrated. Well, we didn't either. The Civil War we lost, and that's the only reason why we integrated with ourselves. Because we were still a loose-knit community of states. We weren't a union. And it's because we lost that war to a dictatorship, namely the Lincoln administration, that created this sense of unity on a false sense of security. Our technology and our wealth is not going to protect us. It's not going to make us immune or naive forever. But let's not go there too much. Let's leave it alone. So what I'm trying to do is to describe how incest can become a cultural facet of a particular culture so naturally as a byproduct without even thinking twice. No effort required. And it wouldn't work any other way. In fact, they make less effort at their sexuality than we do. It's less trouble, right? You know, when you've got incest, they're more sexually mature. They can deal with sex. Because, you know, the kids are taught by their parents, so it's like by involvement as well as examples. So it's not like they have to explain anything. It's like, oh yeah, they know. I just thought this was an interesting concept because it helps us better understand why incest prevails at all. It's not poverty. It's just an ideology of sharing of possessions, which means you don't have to be so wealthy to get by, as opposed to this strong sense of boundaries of privacy, possession. You know, privacy and possession kind of go along the same lines of reasoning. You know, you don't have any privacy if you got to share 8 people to a one-bedroom apartment, obviously. And the sense of possession, you know, this is my room. No, you don't have your own room. You don't have your own anything. You know, if somebody's the same size as you, they'll probably wear your shirt from yesterday, you know. So you're under each other's skin, and so you've got to get along. Maybe that's why they drink so much vodka, not just because it's so cold. Maybe they drank the vodka because it was so cold, and then they learned to get along. However, whatever, which came first, you know. But it's a very interesting topic to think over, you know, because it starts to lend itself to all kinds of ideas. It's like, why is it, more than why is it permitted, why is it supported? Why is it mutually supported by the entire culture, which, you know, in these days would be an entire nation, which in the case of Russia is pretty big. You know, okay, not all of Russia, probably the western section, the European influence bleeds over, and they want to behave more like Europe. But, and I shouldn't, you know, confine myself to Russia alone. You know, it could be anywhere. You just don't know about it. But I'm looking at the psychology, the social psychology of small groups. Why would it be supported? And what role, what function does it play, incest? Well, because we're not looking at it the right way. It's not a function that supports something else. It's just one more example or expression of a much more pervasive psychology that includes much more than sex. In fact, sex is just one element. And for us to make too much out of sex is to incorrectly analyze it out of context to a much more broader perspective. So, I mean, if you want to look at your socks, you know, oh, I can't stand my socks. Yeah, but are you wearing anything else? You know, it's like, really now. And so it's prioritization as well as breadth of attention. You know, what's more important than your socks? Well, like, are you wearing anything? It's just freezing out here, you know. At least you had socks on. You know, not even considering prudery, just, you know, the thing about standing in the cold, you know, outside, you know. Well, he didn't have socks on, but he had everything else on. Oh, whew, you know, he got frostbite on his feet, but you know. So this is really, it's necessary to, you know, expand your mind, you know, and look at relationships, not merely among people, which is what the topic is, you know, incest, but the relationships among the various facets of the family life in various contexts outside of our imperialistic Western hegemony, hegemony, heavy-handed approach to living. Oh, everybody just has to be like us, because why would they want to be any different, Oh, God, talk about, yeah, right, I don't have to say. I'll let you fill in the blank. Okay, enough goofiness.